and the truth as we see it, and we know you're going to give us the same.
Okay.
Of course, I'm Harold W. Dickens III. I'm an attorney at law. I've been practicing just about 10 years. We're here in my office, and Ricky's a friend of mine and a client. And in full disclosure, Professor Paul von Blum was my professor, and he wrote a recommendation for me, and he's part of the reason I got into USC Law School, so he's part of my success story, and I really appreciate and love him and respect him, just like Ricky, and I'm happy and honored and privileged to have these wonderful friends to be able to talk to. But we're here to talk about, we're here to talk about important issues that matter.
Yes.
And so let's just hop right in, because I've got a couple notes here, but obviously you guys are already talking, so I want to just kind of guide it a little. Let's talk first about identity. And I think we're going to always respect our elders, and we're going to generally start first with the professor. And he's asked us to call him Paul, and Mr. Ricky Schroder has asked us to call him Ricky, and I'm Harold. So talk about, and we'll just take just a couple of minutes on identity.
Okay, well, I think identity is important. I don't want to be excessively involved in identity politics, but I think identity is important. And I encourage my students to be proud of their identity. My black students who proudly call themselves African Americans, I think is good. And I think, for example, last night I had my class, and I encouraged my African American students to talk about their experiences and to talk about why it's important for them to say Black Lives Matter. And the reason that I asked them to do that is because they use that slogan because in the past Black lives have not mattered. They all recognize, everybody should recognize that all lives matter. Everybody knows that. It would be absolutely ridiculous to say that all lives don't matter. The reason they say Black Lives Matter is because historically Black lives have not mattered. And by saying that, it promotes the fact that Black people do matter, and they do matter. Because of my personal experience in Black communities, it's really important to promote that Black lives matter, and they matter more than just being servile, being more than just people who work in low-level positions. They matter because they should be involved in every aspect of American life. And I think the reason that we have the Black Lives Matter movement today is to elevate millions of people into realms of respectability that heretofore they've never had. And so I think that movement is particularly important. It came out of the Trayvon Martin case in 2013, and I was really proud to become part of that movement. And I have to say that in my experience, Black people are not racist. They have always welcomed me with, I must say, open arms. Way back in the 60s when I used to walk into Black Panther Party headquarters in North Oakland, nobody ever told me I wasn't welcome. Never.
Yeah.
Not a minute of even looking at me in a strange way.
I really don't know who believes Black lives don't matter. Like, I honestly don't know people that believe Black lives don't matter.
I
don't know them.
I have found that.
You found people like
Yes,
that think
yes.
Black lives don't matter?
Yeah, I have seen people who get nervous at the proclamation of Black Lives Matter when they say, well, all lives matter. Now, as I said, all lives matter, but people say that in opposition to Black Lives Matter. And so when they say that defensively, and some do, that's when, in my judgment, it becomes racist. Not consciously, because so much of racism is unconscious. It's unconscious. It's when people, look, I've been in large classes where I have maybe 4 or 5 African American students, not this one because it's an African American studies class, where my African American students will say something and the white professor will say, and what do you think? As if one African American student is supposed to represent 30 million people. That's unconscious racism. And so they feel it. And when I tell my students that African Americans are made to feel different in 1,000 different ways every week, shopping while Black, driving while Black, studying while Black, it's so much of it is unconscious, so much of it, and they know it. They know
It's
it.
unconscious being directed towards them.
Yeah,
They're
and
white people or fear of black people. What is
fear.
it?
Yeah, I mean fear. I mean sometimes it's overt. I mean, afraid to get into an elevator,
Yeah.
walking across the street, just unconscious gestures. It happens so
I
often.
know, it's sad.
I have hundreds of
It's sad.
stories that my black students have told me, and it happens so often. I wish it weren't the case.
Yeah. Let me ask you about Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives, of course, matter. Is it the organization of BLM that maybe isn't in alignment with the statement that Black Lives Matter? Like, are they in alignment as an organization with their goals, with their tenets, with their, like, I don't know much about Black Lives Matter organization. I'm trying to learn, but one of the things that concerned me was I did some research and it said that the nucleus family, like the Black Lives Matter foundational position is that the nuclear family, how do they feel about the Western white nuclear family? Is that something, what I'm getting at is there cultural differences between black folk and white folk in the way that we raise our children? Is black culture more of a matriarchal society, I'm curious, than patriarchal, or is it, because Native Americans, for example, is a total matriarchal society, where when I think about black culture with my limited knowledge, I think of it's a pretty strong matriarchal or balanced led culture, as opposed to the traditional Western European father led patriarchal. Would you agree with that or no?
Not especially. It depends. I
Yeah.
mean, there are a lot of single mothers leading, and there are strong structural and economic reasons for that. And unemployment is much higher in African American communities, and so you have those problems. But I know a lot of families with highly traditional.
So is BLM's goal to change the nuclear family, to change that structure, and more into like a village, raising of a village atmosphere?
Sometimes, and I don't think the Western model is something that should be elevated as the pinnacle of the highest values. I mean, I grew up in that family. Many of my artist friends grew up that way, in highly traditional ways. But I don't think that should be the entire model of what should be emulated as the only.
Well, I mean, what should be emulated is what works best for the children, right? What works best for them to be successful moving forward, whatever that may be, whatever we need to do as adults and parents, to provide for them so that they can have a better world, better future. So what I'm getting at is I'm reading. Can I bring him up?
Yeah, bring him up.
This congressman, Burgess Owens, he called me a couple weeks ago, and we had a nice phone call, and then we've kept in touch since. And I'm reading his book. I'm halfway through it, and this man is very wise, very wise man. And some of the things in it that he speaks about, I haven't read the whole book, but some of the things he speaks about it are resonate with me. And one being that he sees the biggest challenge for the black community as the breakdown of the family in the black community, and the external forces that are creating that, like perhaps the drug cycle, the drugs coming in, and a prison cycle, and just that whole machine of so he theorizes some of that. He theorizes how about in the 40s, 50s, and 60s the black middle class was expanding, was growing, and there was he grew up in a segregated community, and so he was talking about how in his community the black people took great pride in competing against the white community. They had their own community, and they had their own.
We should look more closely at what happened during the Reagan years and the way in which
The drugs.
what Reagan did with dismantling all the wonderful programs of the New Deal. That was what Reaganism was all about. Cut out the New Deal, and it was continued under both Bushes, and they created havoc economically. It was not only the black community that suffered; it was working class whites, excuse me, who suffered.
Back to the BLM though for a second. So that model, I think some of our conflict comes from the way our peoples, I mean, in Africa, wasn't it more of a, historically, more of a village setting and a communal setting of raising families, raising children, as opposed to the Northern European experience, which is more like in small nuclear families? Was it different the way our cultures, and therefore some of the conflicts we see today?
What's the point?
Well, I'm just
You're not
trying to
gonna go
understand.
back, we're not gonna go back to an African tribal
No.
culture. They're here. I mean, they are African American because they're African roots. What we need, I mean, the big problem, this is gonna sound extraordinarily radical, but I believe it. What we need is a system of reparation payments. I mean, your congressman friend would be horrified by that. Would be absolutely horrified.
I'm willing to listen
The
to
whole
it.
Republican Party would be horrified by that.
What would that cost? I'm just
A
curious.
lot.
Do we have an idea?
A lot. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but yes, it would cost billions, maybe
Trillions.
It might. It might. I'm in favor of massive governmental expenditures, and that would be a massive redistribution of our wealth. I'm in favor of that.
So you are a socialist.
I absolutely am a
absolutely
socialist,
okay.
but I'm a democratic socialist in the tradition of Bernie Sanders, for whom I voted twice.
Mhm.
So I make no bones about
Right.
that. I'm doing my classes online
Right.
because all of us are. We're going to go back in the fall, but I think sometimes as my students see my office, such as it is, it's a mess. But sometimes as they see it, they can see my Bernie Sanders 2020
Yeah.
hat. Sometimes as they pan around, yes, I voted for Bernie.
It was stolen from Bernie. Yeah.
Well, I'm actually pleased with what President Biden is doing. I'm
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised. But yes, I do believe in the redistribution of wealth. I like his wealth tax proposal. I like Elizabeth Warren's wealth tax. I'm not. A
May I interject briefly? Just to point out that, don't you also believe in redistribution, Ricky? Didn't you say that, use an analogy of a boat, that if you put all the resources on one side of a boat, the boat's going to tip over, and that there has to be some kind of symmetry in the distribution, otherwise it
Correct. The
creates
boat has
instability?
to be somewhat balanced, or else it will capsize.
So
For
are you a
sure.
socialist too?
I don't think I'm a socialist. I'm not a socialist.
But so what is your take on redistribution? Do you think
my
Bezos
take is that 25% of Americans pay 87% of the federal income tax. 25%. That's already a big burden on 1/4 of our taxpayers to pay 87%. So I don't know how much more we can tax certain people. I think the elites, the uber elites, they absolutely can.
Jeff Bezos supports a wealth tax.
Can contribute more.
That just came out. He just came out of the news saying that you should tax. He supports a wealth tax of taxing the rich. This is Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon.
What I prefer about more taxes, what I would prefer to do instead of more taxes is just let's spend our money better. Let's spend our money better.
What's our
And
biggest expenditure?
But we need more of it.
Yeah, we need more.
But what's our biggest expenditure? You know this. What do we spend our money on?
The war machine.
The military.
The war machine. So
Big.
yeah, I have a problem with the way the military's been used the last 30 years. Since my adult life, I have a problem with what happened in Iraq with the fake WMD
And
then
wars.
and that war. I have a problem with them Obama pulling out and creating a vacuum for ISIS. I have a problem with Afghanistan sending 2,500 guys to die there and 20,000 amputees and $2 trillion.
Horrible.
For what? For what? What did we get, right?
Nothing.
So I think it's a matter of using the monies we have. Obviously, if we have to tax, we'll tax, but using our money is better.
I agree.
And can I make one small point? Because you guys are having a great conversation, and I just want to say, because you said he's a socialist and what you believe, but I have my own perspective, and I just want to point out that I agree with the thrust of what you're saying, that we didn't get as American people what we should have. But it's useful to point out what the people who went over there got, because they were able to secure the oil channels through the Caspian Sea. They were able to secure the water resources, and this is the reason I'm saying this, they were able to secure the opium trade, the opioid trade, because when Bin Laden came in, he burned down all the poppy fields. But when the U.S. government went in there, they said, no, we need our opioids. And that's why there's an opioid pandemic or epidemic. We need to tie the war machine and the war in Afghanistan